Thumper describes itself as a rhythm violence experience. Thumper itself doesn't have any real violence to speak of though, so you might be wondering what this means. Thumper is definitely a rhythm action game. You complete actions to the beat in order to progress through the levels. Thumper is also blindingly fast. Many of the actions you'll be completing will be done very quickly together, and at a pace that, at times, I couldn't believe that I was able to keep up with. Thirdly, true to its name, Thumper's actions have so much impact. If you're playing with a good sound system, or a solid pair of headphones, get the volume up and enjoy the heavy, thumping, smashing, and crashing your little space beetle does as it careens down the track. Finally, unlike many other rhythm games, if you miss a turn, you take damage, and then one more hit will destroy you, forcing you to restart that segment of the track again. Despite the simple appearance, Thumper is incredibly difficult. These 4 points together give the game the violent feel. The fast-paced, rhythmic nature of the game, coupled with the heavy thumps and crashes, feels incredibly brutal. It's nearly impossible to describe. Even watching gameplay doesn't give that same feel that playing does. With that out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay. Watching the video here in the background, you might be wondering what it is that you actually do. Thumper has only one button for actions, and then 4 directional movement options. I was playing on the Steam controller using A for action, and the thumbstick for movement, for example. The first action that the game teaches you is to simply press the action button on pads that appear on the track. It then goes on to teach you how to take corners, by pressing the action button at the same time as pressing the direction that the corner is taking. These actions feel very natural, which is helpful when you only have milliseconds to react to the inputs coming at you along the track. After some practice with these basics, you're then taught the third action, which is a jump. That's activated by holding up and pressing the action button, and then finally you discover a downward slam, which can be activated by pressing down whilst in the air. That's it. Those are your actions. The difficulty comes from combining these actions and getting the timing right to complete the levels. In addition to just completing the levels, you're also provided with a rank based on how well you perform throughout each stage of the track. Thumper is upfront with this information on completing a segment, and even provides a fast restart button in case you make a mistake and want to repeat a segment to try again. It even provides you with a restart previous segment option in the event that you complete a segment thinking you were going to get an S rank, but got something less. This provides the high score chasers with an incredibly flexible system, allowing the player to replay sections that they might be having trouble nailing, without having to grind through other sections. It also means a small mistake doesn't cost you a huge amount of time, as you can quickly restart. When I first started playing, I thought that if I applied myself, I'd be able to get S rank on the stages, as the retry system is very flexible. But I quickly learned that I would not be getting those fabled S ranks, but instead would be struggling to survive because the difficulty picks up extremely quickly. As you progress through the stages, the levels get quicker and the actions get tighter and more complicated. Even though I struggled immensely with Thumper, I wouldn't say that the difficulty is unfair. The game provides you with audible cues as to what's coming up, but I didn't have the capacity to track this in addition to process what I needed to do next. That being said, I failed on some sections so many times that I was able to learn the upcoming sections, and when nailing these, Thumper feels incredible. I've mentioned this before in my Celeste review, but nailing a sequential set of complex actions to survive a section feels really rewarding. Be warned though, Thumper doesn't have any assist mode, and without a lot of perseverance, unless you have incredible reaction time, Thumper is going to be a slog. Thankfully, restarts don't take very long at all, and the track segments start quite short and pick up in length to the point where, at the longest, they probably only take around a minute to beat. This is with the exception of Thumper's bosses. To defeat a boss, you need to hit a string of beats in a row, and if successful, the track provides the beetle with a final beat that sends a pulse out damaging the boss. If the player is not successful, the string of beats will restart, forcing the player to retry that string again until they are successful. Usually, the boss only requires 4 hits to be taken out, so the boss levels, if done well, can be beaten in the space of a minute, but can take longer depending on how long you're able to hold out without successfully hitting the notes. As someone who relishes in a challenge, the daunting difficulty wasn't a negative point for me, but I feel as though this may be the most polarising point for all players. I've come this far without discussing the music, which is odd for a rhythm game, but Thumper's soundtrack is strange. Whilst playing, I didn't even realise that there was a soundtrack there. The player effectively acts as the beat, and other than the beat, there's a consistent drum track and then some eerie strings in the background. The soundtrack is a strange mix of energetic and unsettling, which fits perfectly into the entire feel of the game. The visuals of the game, much like the music, are extremely minimalistic. Thumper almost has a low poly aesthetic, but the curves are extremely smooth and don't look overly polygonal. The background has this dark oil spill appearance, and the track is a dark silver looking line that extends out into the darkness ahead. In addition to looking overly creepy, thankfully, the visuals make the objects that the player needs to interact with stand out, which helps you make the right move in the tiny time frame that you have to react. As you progress through Thumper, you will find that the track also seems to have a life of its own, with slender tentacles waving around the track, often forming shapes and generally just doing a great job of being creepy. Thumper's bosses are also nightmarish. The mid-boss is usually a strange, pulsating shape that flies out in front of the space beetle and morphs and writhes as you attempt to defeat it. The final boss is always a sort of demonic head. The head gets more and more menacing as you beat each level, and towards the end of the game it looks absolutely horrifying. Despite all of this creepy, eerie, horrifying, nightmarish, brutal, writhing and darkness, the game isn't actually scary, as it is just a rhythm game and there aren't going to be jump scares or unseen dangers, and the lo-fi look of the game prevents the demonic heads and shapes from being visually unappealing. It's a difficult balance, but one that much works in Thumper's favour. In summary, I would absolutely recommend Thumper to anyone to try, but the intense difficulty might be too much for many players, so proceed with caution. As always, if you have anything to say, let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this review.